This conference is brought to you by CallStack, your React and React Native development experts.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aurora. I'm a web developer from Norway, and I work as a consultant at Crayon Consulting in Oslo. And I'm excited to be here to be speaking about modern React patterns, concurrent rendering actions, and what's next. I'm actually not a native developer, but I'm really happy to be here and update you guys on what's happening on the web side of things. So handling async operations in UI components can be tricky. We might encounter flickering pending states, inefficient state updates, and unstable user experiences, and overall excess complexity. And with React 18, we got concurrent rendering, which allowed us to improve the responsiveness and UX of our apps already. And now in 19, we have even more tools at our disposal and new ways to combine them. So these are the concurrent features we are going to explore today. Sorry. useTransition, useOptimistic, and useDeferredValue. And they are going to become increasingly more important with view transitions coming to React, which we are also going to see at the end. So who here has ever used useTransition? Can I see how many people have used that? OK, what about useOptimistic? What about useDeferredValue? OK, nice. And who has tried the experimental release of view transitions in React? That's very impressive. So yeah, great. Let's begin and dive deeper into these features. So I have here some selects for years, tags, speakers, and conferences. And let's just see the UX of this. So when I click one of these selects, you'll see I have kind of a delay in the select. I can try that again. So I'm clicking, and then it feels kind of stuck. It's not updating instantly. And if I click multiple, for example, AI and Angular, I get this sort of premature loading state. So it's not exactly how it's supposed to be. And this also does like a flicker here. So clearly, I have some UX problems in this select. Let's see the code and check out how this has been implemented. So the selects are implemented by this async select component. And looking at the code, it's written in the most common way that people write React code today. Yeah, I have here a selected state, then I have a select with an onSelect event. We have this async function, execute async work, getting the result, setting it as a selected value. And then I'm also managing the loading state here, setting it to true, and then finally setting it to false. So looking at this code, I'm able to identify the problems or the cause of the UX problems. So this one is pretty clear. When we wait for the result, of course, the select is not going to update until the result is done. So that one makes a lot of sense. But for the flicker, the reason that's happening is because I have this, I'm managing my loading state with this shared use state here, which means that whichever async call finishes first is going to overwrite the previous state, and then we get this premature loading state that we saw earlier. And that's also the reason that we get that weird flicker on the selected value. So the fundamental issue here is that the browser does not natively support async events or coordinating work across async events. And I need a way to handle the work as multiple things are clicked, and then once they're all done, set the states in a batch. Fortunately, React has an API for this, transitions. Transitions allow us to coordinate async work across events and render. So let's see how we can use transitions here to improve the UX and avoid those flickering states. So I'm going to import here useTransition. And useTransition returns a pending flag and a function to start a transition. And start transition will mark some sort of group of state updates and async work as deferred or lower priority. So I'm going to wrap this around my async work here. Let's just wrap it all the way down. And since we are in React 19, we can use async transitions like this and just move the async flag. And then I don't need my manual loading state anymore. I can just use this one and remove all of this manual work here, like that. And we also need to wrap additional state updates after an async function in a transition, but this is going to change in the future. So let's do another start transition here. Yeah, we're not going to need this in the future. So what I'm actually doing here is creating what's called an action, and that's just terminology for a function called in a transition. Let's try this out. So now when I select these values, one is just the same behavior, but selecting now multiple, you'll see the loading state is entirely in sync until the whole interaction is done. So 1, 2, and then it's just persisting until executing everything at the end. So we don't have any more flickering problems. So that's one thing fixed. But I still have this problem of the select not updating right away. So I need some sort of optimistic update for this. And we could do it ourselves and set the selected value, roll it back, all of that. But instead, let's use optimistic for this. So we can get the useOptimistic hook. And this hook works alongside actions and takes in a state to show when no action is pending, which can be our selected value here. And then it returns a optimistic selected value, and then also a trigger function. And we can call this trigger function in the transition we want to coordinate with. So that's just this one over here. Then use the optimistic selected value as our selected values. And the way this works is that for as long as the transition is running, we have this temporary optimistic state that just is settles to the past state once the transitions are done. And that means that our interaction will look like this. So we have this instant optimistic update entirely in sync with the loader here. And it becomes a bit clearer if we actually reject this promise and see what it looks like then. So let me reject this, and then I'll just comment out the toast. And let's see that. So now when I click, I still have this optimistic update, but it just falls back to this past value because the past value didn't match anymore. So it's like an automatic rollback. So now we have actually fixed all of our UX problems. Let's see this again. And we have this very smooth interaction, no flickering states. Yeah, that's just a toast. That's okay. Right. So what is this app anyway? Let's see what's inside this app. This is actually a Next.js App Router app. And I have set it up with Prisma as my ORM and Prisma Postgres database. And right now we were only looking at the filters, but there is a couple more things inside this app. So let me just put back some talks explorer and then a function get talks that I just commented out here earlier. And let's see what that is. Oops. So here I have this talks explorer component, and it just is a grid of talks. And you can see the details view. You can also search inside these, so AI, right, you get the point. And this is built using server components, but all of this is still totally applicable to client-side React. So here I'm using the search params. I'm getting the filter options from my database. That's how I get these values. I also get the talks from a getTalks function based on those search params and pass it down to the Explorer. So what we want to do now is actually hook up the filters to be able to filter this talks explorer. So the filters is what we were looking at earlier. This is my async selects here that we were already coding. Go back here and hook this up to the router. And to do that, I'm going to need the router and the search params. So I'll just get these from Next.js navigation. And let's, instead of doing all of this dummy execute async work here, let's just push those search params based on what we selected to the URL. So I'll just remove this and instead do a router push, create some query params with the value, and then import my stuff like that. So now the way the Next.js router works is we're pushing some search params that trigger a server component to regenerate the payload. That means that it's actually a transitioning state. So we're going to track this now with our select. And it should just work with the way we implemented this already, for example, AI and Angular. So now we're pushing to the router, we're tracking our state, we have the optimistic state, and everything is super smooth. And that means that this component is actually a router select now, right? It's a very reusable, it's a useful component that for a use case that we commonly encounter in the Next.js App Router. So I'm just going to name it router select. And let's just rename the whole file as well. Router select, and all the instances are now router select, like that. So it's definitely useful, but what if we wanted to add like some sort of custom behavior here? Maybe we want to add a toast or any sort of side effect that I don't want to include inside the router select itself because it already has its purpose. What we need is a way to coordinate some sort of async work from the outside of the component. And we can do that by exposing an action property. An action property is just the function with action in the name that we pass down and call inside the transition. So here, we're going to call our select action with the items like that. And we call it select action because the parent will now know what sort of behavior they can expect when they use this. Let's also await this so it will be be max flexible, and we can call async functions as well here. And now we can actually coordinate anything with this transition. And we can even move the whole router push and make this like a design component, async select again. But for this demo, let's just keep it a router select. And go to the filters and start using that select action. So for the year, let's use the select action here. And here, I want to customize the loading behavior of the select here. Right now, it's just the regular spinner. This is what we want to customize. So I actually have this loading bar up here. So let's set the progress to 100 here when the transition is done. So this is going to be synchronized with the transition. And let's also hide the spinner so that we can fully customize that behavior. And that's now going to be, oh, sorry, I forgot something. That's why it's like weird now. I forgot to remove this internal state. Let's get rid of this so it doesn't look out of sync, like that. Yeah, so we can now customize this behavior. And for example, I can select a year. And once the transition completes, we have this loading bar going to 100. But since I don't have the spinner, I still want to know that I clicked something. So we can also add in an additional function call into this transition. It can be an optimistic progress. And here I'm using useOptimistic, and I'm also using the, using this reducer function from useOptimistic to handle so that my loading bar never goes above 100 for this optimistic value. We can use this on our loading bar and increment the progress optimistically inside the select action. Let's increment it by 30. So now you'll see when I click this, I get this optimistic update, and then I get the real progress coordinated with the transition. And I can click this multiple times, and it will just handle the optimistic update will coordinate, and then complete. So I have this custom behavior here now. What about the tag? Let's do another select action here. In this case, we want to do a success toast. And I have this, I can start transition. This is going to change in the future, luckily. Let's pass the items. And let's also do an update theme color here. So I'm just going to pass in the items and a document ref. So this imperative is going to be called right away as soon as we click the button. And the toast will be synchronized with the transition. For example, we can select Angular or React, and then we get that toast at the end, but then we have the theme update right away. What's your favorite framework? I heard Vue is like maybe the wrong pick here. OK, let's keep it at Vue. Right, so we have that. What else? We can do the speaker also with some custom behavior. Oops. Let's customize this router select as well. And here we're going to celebrate a speaker, Anisha. She did a great talk yesterday, and I am generation of hooks, by the way. And pass the items here. And I have this exploding variable or state that is triggering a confetti explosion up here. And it's using state, as you can see. So I'm going to put this variable here. And that means it will be coordinated with a transition. But in this case, I wanted to trigger right away. So I guess I would be using the onSelect event. But that means I will have to manually set this back to false at some point so it can re-trigger. So instead of using onSelect, we can keep using our select action and then just switch this to useOptimistic. So now we will just fall back to false once the transition is completed. Let's see how that looks now. So Anisha, we get the confetti, and it will go back to false, and then we can get it again without manually handling that state. For the conference select, let's do that one as well. Select action. We made this async, right? So we can actually pass in async functions here. And we can, for example, log that a user has selected a conference. And let's pass in the items as well. So we'll get the items. And let's also await this random server function. I'm not sure what this does. Maybe we can trigger this later at some point. Right. For now, let's move on and start adding some view transitions to this. Clear this up first. So view transitions are coming to React, and I don't have insider information, but I'm pretty sure we'll see a lot of this at React Conf next month. The reason it fits so well into this talk is because we need these concurrent features to make the most out of view transitions. So view transitions are triggered by an element that updates in a transition, or with suspense, or with a deferred update, with, for example, useDeferredValue. So, for example, when a transition is finished, React can automatically animate the result of that transition to the new UI. So let's try to add some of that as well. In my layout here, I'll just import the view transition component. So it's experimental, by the way, but there's already documentation. You should try it out. And wrap my entire app with this one. And you'll see that right away I got that default crossfade triggered here. So when I'm loading the app now, since it's using suspense, I get the default view transition crossfade. And it's also happening on my routers, or push to the router, because Next.js is using the suspense-enabled router pattern from the React team. So that means that every navigation is a transition by default. So this already works out of the box with navigations. But most of the time, we don't want to wrap our whole app. We would rather wrap like specific parts of the UI that we want to animate. So I'm going to put this on specific parts of the UI instead of the whole app. And let's begin by going to the page and going to the Talks Explorer. So here I have the search field, I have the active filters, and then I have the Talks grid, which is what is being replaced by that fallback. So it's using suspense, we're streaming in the content. Yeah. And I want to animate the suspense into the content as it streams in. So we can wrap our fallback in a view transition, like this. And view transitions actually have a couple different activators. They can activate, or that we can use to add custom CSS. So we have an activator, and then we can add custom CSS to an activator. So for example, we can customize what happens when this view transition component enters the DOM, when it's removed from the DOM with exit, when something inside it updates, or we can use what's called a shared element transition, which we're going to also see in a bit. For this one, we just want to add a custom CSS for the exit of this. So let's do a slide down. And I just have this in my globals file here, view transition, pseudo element. Yeah, I just copied this from the docs. I don't know how to make animations, by the way. Yeah, so let's add that there. And let's also animate the Talks grid. So for the Talks grid, it can also let it slide down, maybe every time the search params change. So just move the key here. And then when it enters, I want to slide it up. And this would opt in the whole subtree into maybe some unintentional animation. So what you can do is you can set a default of none, so that only these two activators will run the animations. And let's see how that looks now. So once I load this app, my suspense is sliding down as the content slides up, giving us this very intentional animation. What about the cards? They are currently not animating here. I want to also add an animation to this interaction. So we'll go to the talks grid. And here I have some talk details and the talk card, which is what we're currently looking at now. So I want to animate the talk details as we open it. So I'll add a view transition around this here. And let's customize the enter activator with a slide in. So that should work, right? Except this is just a regular state update. And we need to have some sort of transition or suspense or deferred update to trigger a view transition. So luckily, the trigger for this is the onSelect prop, and we can just change this to a select action that we know is using a transition, because that's exposed by the talk card. We can do the same for the close, just do a close action here, so that we know this will trigger our view transition. And that should work, so we slide it in, and we have the default crossfade back. But you know what? Since I have like two very similar components here that are not in the view at the same time, this is a great case to use a shared element transition. And to create a shared element transition, we need to give a view transition a unique name. For example, expanded talk ID. And then we need to give the same name to the other component that we want to animate into. So I'll wrap this with view transition with the same name from the talk ID in this case. And then what will happen is, as this transition completes with this close action, select action, React will animate between those two, as the one inserts the DOM and the other exits. So that will look like this. So I get this shared element transition between those different components. It's nice, right? It's nice on the big screen. Yeah. Thank you. What else? We can still add a couple more things here. Let's also animate the search here. So right now, it's just React. It's just, looks normal. We're going to also add an animation to that. That would be inside the Talks Explorer again, where we have our search and we have our search field. So this is just on-chain set search, which means that there is no view transition triggering, being triggered here, even though our cards are wrapped in view transition components. And this is where useDeferredValue comes in. So we can get about this hook useDeferredValue. Oops, not that one. And you might know this from React 18. It can be used to keep, for example, an input responsive without blocking the interaction while something else is being filtered. Or it could be used for if you saw the ByteDance talk yesterday, they had like this slider with some sort of expensive rendering. That's also a good case for useDeferredValue. Or you can use it with async data fetching to improve UX. But the way it works is it takes in a value, and then it returns a deferred version of that value, which will lag behind the past value. Then we can pass this to the part of our UI that we want to defer the rendering of. So that's my talks grid. And then you can also, for example, get the isStale variable when the deferred value is not the same as the regular value. And we can use this to just enable a spinner here with isSearching. So this will allow React to animate the diff here between the deferred or the search and the deferred UI over here. So now when I search here, we'll get this beautiful animation triggered by useDeferredValue. And it looks very nice. Yeah. All right. Let's see all of this in action with just like a final demo here. So I can load the page. I can slide the suspense fallback down as the list slides up. We can have this shared element transition between the different detail view and the list. We also have this search triggered by useDeferredValue with a spinner. And I also have a router push on my filter, so I am also triggering that shared element transition here. I can clear this, get the animation on the list, sliding up. And then I have a bunch of different custom selects here, improved with useOptimistic useTransition. I have added custom behavior, for example, this optimistic spinner. I also have on tag, I'm setting a theme. What's your favorite framework? React, OK. I think React Native is here, hold on. OK, it's the same color. All right, and I get the toast here in sync with the transition. I also have customized the speaker select here, so we had an explosion, which is resetting by itself because of useOptimistic, so I can trigger this many times. And what about the conference? I had that random server function, right? Maybe if I select React Universe 2025, let's see. So, yep, that's it for this talk. You can find the code here on the URL, and you can also scan the QR code. I have like socials there, and you can also find the GitHub through the QR code. And that's it. So thank you for having me here, and guys, enjoy the party later. Thank you.